Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you might be in the world. This is us three again. We'll see if anyone else comes along. We were just talking as we were going to start that 3D robotics has been sold. It's been sold to, it's not Project Wing, is it? But it's the guy from Google. And Chris Anderson's going to be getting into making unmanned aerial vehicles for, has anyone noticed? Uninhabited is gaining ground. Going off topic a little bit, it's everywhere. They're calling them just so they can keep using the term UAV. I think because everyone's keyboard seemed to be hardwired to say drone or UAV, or perhaps they're hardwired not to say drone now, and they want to see UAV. But uninhabited aerial vehicle is becoming a thing, which really annoys me. But no, Chris is going to be making flying taxis, flying cars, because of his experience of certification. That's what the man said.
So who's going to rush out and register fluba.com?
So Kitty Hawk have bought 3DR. Now, what I laugh at all of these headlines, I've just spotted something on this, and I missed this, but I've literally seen it now, is they're all saying DJI rival. Since when has 3DR been a DJI rival? Okay, since when has 3DR been anyone's rival?
Don't you remember the Iris?
But what about the term American manufacturer as well?
Yeah,
I suppose Mexico was or is in the Americas, so I suppose that's true.
But they haven't made hardware for. Well, they were selling last the unique drone, weren't they? Weren't they selling the unique drone as part of their package? Chris is a survivor. I think what you can say about Chris is he knows when to do a deal, and he's very good at making something sound a lot better than it really is, frankly.
Well, yeah, he is. And joining us now, Joseph Dockstader, who, may I just quote, is quite a fan of the old men speculating wildly format. Now, young man, now then. Plainly, I don't know what he's talking about or what he watches to think that's this. But Joseph is, Joseph, perhaps you want to tell us what you are or who you are.
Yeah, sure. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, can hear you. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, I am a flight test engineer in the drone delivery industry. I previously worked at Zipline for a couple of years. I'm now at Valancy. Can't talk too much about either of those, but I am here to generally heckle and answer any questions if you have any about drone delivery. I know this topic comes up on here fairly frequently. Yeah. Well,
I'm a sort of a fan of it. I'm not a fan of the drone delivery to my house with a DVD. Aging myself there, trying hard to think of something that weighs about a DVD weight. I'm not, because that went in the first round of protestations about delivery drones. DVDs. That's how long it's been going. DVDs were the weapon of choice for what they were going to be bringing us, but that wouldn't happen anymore. But I'm a big fan of stuff that Zipline's doing in Africa, and just as having seen their second machine in the flesh, just monster impressed with all the technology in it. And I'm sure the Valancy Volley series, I think it is, of their separate F-thrusts are equally interesting. But I know one thing I definitely wanted to ask you, Joseph, was how did you arrive here? Did you come from the model aircraft world and probably some degrees, or did you just come straight from degree land? Oh, he doesn't want to answer. Is that me or everyone else? No, there we are.
Oh, and Ian's gone too. There's just the two of us, mate.
Sorry about that. I'm back.
No, wait. You also got rid of Ian as well.
Oh, I killed him.
Yeah.
That was weird. I lost all audio. That was strange. It just all audio fell off on my side.
We lost all of you. We lost you as well. I don't know. Did you get my question there?
I did.
Joseph, even sorry.
Yeah, you're asking kind of how I came into the industry. Certainly from the model aviation side was my background originally. I think I started flying at about 10, give or take, somewhere around there. Very small. Started crashing around then, at least. Flying took a little longer. Interestingly, it was actually Bruce here who got me largely into the hobby, not with any knowledge on his part.
Oh, blame me.
It was largely your fault, everything that's happened since. I can remember my first cloverleaf antenna, first CP antenna I made was from your FPV backpack series about a decade ago now. I still have that antenna. That was how I got into it. I, coming out of high school, started an attempt at a nonprofit with a friend of mine, where we developed some very, very cheap cargo platforms, unmanned cargo platforms, with big dreams of, dropping first aid kits into war zones or besieged cities or hurricane-stricken places, things like that. We built a good aircraft, and we were 18, 19, so it didn't really go anywhere. But then that was what got me really into the industry, was that experience. No degrees. I was a art school dropout with some experience applying the technology from the hobby.
Oh dear. That's interesting, isn't it? He's in the land of everything should work really, really well. Or is it going to fall over for us? Is it the platform tonight, I wonder? Is it StreamYard?
Ian's gone silent because he's muted.
Hello, sorry, I had the wrong button.
Not sure what happened there.
Yeah, I don't know. Don't know whether it's the platform or just that you're in the third world like me.
Yeah, could very well be me.
So what was the name of the thing you developed then? It wasn't that thing built along a tube, was it?
So that was called the Red Propellers. It was a project we did a long time ago, but it was a platform that stacked about the pitch CG point. So you had modules that could stack laterally outwards, and you could go anywhere from 2 meter to 8 meter. And all of the modules, whether it was a fuselage or a motor pod or a wing or a payload module or anything, they all shared the same CG and pitch. So you could stack laterally and just tweak your mixer and have a very flexible platform. That was what got me into the industry. But yeah, I'm not one of these people who came in with a degree in aerospace or anything like that. I dropped out of actually Falmouth University in the UK, where dropped out of there after about a full year there.
It's a great place to go to university. My one of my nephews went there and just mucked about, basically. A lovely part of the world to be, and probably quite one of the worst places of the world to be to try and be a student, I think.
Yes,
for a lot of reasons. Yeah, it is. I've heard of this place. I know of Falmouth. No, how lovely. How very, very nice. Well, that's pretty cool in itself then. So you've come from... So do you think then, obviously you had enough learned knowledge from crashing lots of model airplanes, as all of us have, to bring it to the... and there he goes, to bring it to the space. That's a pity. Oh, he's coming in 2 streams, 2 windows now, 2 urgent burritos. There we are. So yeah, your knowledge from the model aircraft world must have been enough to just to keep your foot in the door, and with practical knowledge rather than just considered college knowledge.
Yeah, exactly. I got in, and I think it was valuable to have, because I think a lot of the, there are exceptions, depends on the company you're at, but a lot of the newer drone delivery companies don't have that many people with model aircraft or more professional unmanned systems experience. There's a lot of companies where it's people with general tech and robotics experience coming in and relearning very slowly a lot of the lessons that have already been learned by those who've been doing this in other capacities for longer. So I think that was valuable.
And if you've got a fix on what weight, if it doesn't give away anything for either of the companies, what do you think the ideal weight is to carry now? You must have had a perception when you started your NGO, and I bet you've got a different perception now.
Certainly. I would say that's a tough question to answer because it can vary on quite a few things, but my way of answering that question would be to say that really your bare minimum vehicle mass for something that can go a significant useful distance and carry reasonable payload is probably going to be somewhere around 15 kilograms. That's, in my experience, whether you're fixed wing, multi-rotor, anything like that, that's really going to be your minimum viable vehicle mass with current technology. So that gives you a decent amount of headroom between there and 55 pounds. Sorry, I'm mixing units here.
Yeah.
Say it's 30 pounds-ish is your kind of minimum viable vehicle.
Oh, what a shame. What a shame. As everybody else.
It's no, we could say nothing and just let Gary.
Yeah, well, that's what you two were doing. You were saying nothing and being still, you devils. Shame, man. Shame your that, and this is proving the value of 5G for command and control systems as we move forward.
Yeah, I wouldn't want
whereabouts are you now? You are probably somewhere that's supposed to be pretty high speed mobile internet, isn't it?
Me?
Yeah.
I'm in Davis, California right now, which usually has pretty good internet, but is... I know I wouldn't want this to be my C2 link right now, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Anyway, so back to what I was saying. Really, the minimum viable mass to do something useful with your aircraft is somewhere around 30 pounds, in my experience. And so you have about somewhere around 25 pounds of headroom on top of that before you get to the 55-pound regulatory maximum for SUAS that most countries seem to be implementing. What eats into that is getting fancy. So at a company that I have worked at, I won't say which, we tended to get very fancy with systems being added for reliability, whether you're going for extreme redundancy or just adding additional features that are useful for safety. You can eat up that budget with reliability. You can also eat up that budget with extra range, or you can eat up that budget with going to a VTOL system, especially if it's a separate lift thrust or some kind of articulating thrust system. You can eat up your mass budget that way. So theoretically,
I'll say something.
Go on. Something. You'll say something. It's funny. He keeps coming back. Back. So it's not your. Oh, it says banned from studio. I've not seen that. Oh, and I didn't ban him. I didn't ban him. There's a little thing that says banned from studio.
The ban hammer hasn't come down yet. Sorry about that. Anyway, I can ramble on for as long as I want, but the big picture is, if you go bare minimum, you can probably carry 20 pounds of payload at reasonable distance, but you're going to have an unreliable platform, or you're going to need fancy launch equipment. In general, there are going to be compromises that eat into that. And so in my experience, you're unlikely with something that fits under SUAS to get more than about 10-ish pounds of useful payload. And some places a lot less than that. Some are squeezing a tiny bit more. But that's about the maximum I've seen under the 55-pound gross weight.
What do you reckon to Wingcopter? I'll let the other chaps ask some questions in a minute. Sorry, what do you reckon to Wingcopter having their was it 3 winches now on board their machine? Isn't that just overbaked nonsense?
I think that's actually very intelligent. In general, I think that one area that UAS delivery will be really valuable is sort of hub to hub. So going from a reasonably populated area where there might be businesses with goods to a reasonably populated area where there are people that need those goods or businesses that need those goods. And you might have quite a bit of a gap in between that might be frustrating to get between for whatever reason, whether that's traffic or whether that's bad road conditions or whatever it is. So in my opinion, I actually think that the three separate delivery units on a single aircraft could be quite valuable, because you might be able to have...
Oh dear. Oh dear, oh dear. I was thinking about distance today. We've got oh, here he comes again. There we are. We're back.
So sorry. Anyway,
well, okay.
Quite smart.
John Arn has a good idea. Maybe try switching the video off. We'll just go audio only.
Yep.
That might help.
I'm there we go.
Yeah.
We'll see if that makes a difference. Yeah, I think the three payload units in a single aircraft idea is quite smart, because you can potentially go from a hub where you might have three different products that need delivery, and you might have three orders in a similar time span. And if you can do that with a single aircraft, that's great. I think it lends flexibility. I don't know it's necessarily what I would prioritize, but I don't see it as being a bad idea.
It's yeah, I just thought it was amusing, and I see they've also just put up a new pod which looks far simpler than the other ones they've done, but looks like it carries a lot more stuff. But that's one of the things with that I will say about the Wingcop train, especially the new one, is it looks really nice. And I do think a good rule of thumb for aviation is that is really good old sort. If it looks right, it'll probably fly right. I don't know. What's your considerations on that, Bruce? See if we can get the unhinged man in on that.
No.
There we go.
The rule of I always wins.
The rule of I. Yes, I suppose.
If it looks good, it'll be all right.
Do you reckon? I think it does, doesn't it? It just
a lot of the time. It's this sort of it depends. If you've been involved in aircraft and design and flying aircraft for some time, you get a feel for what's going to work and what's not, and so you can tell if services are disproportionate or if there's obviously some kind of issue in terms of the way your thrust lines are laid out, and so you just have an intuitive feel for it. But of course, nothing beats a good bit of 3D rendering and
3D rendering. Yes, of course, but of course, yeah. No, it strikes me that I've seen a few, and we seem to be on moving it to the urban air mobility thing, which we started with Chris, I suppose. We seem to be settling down on a few designs for those, but I still am worried that all of them are using articulated motors, and at least 2 or 3 of the motors, and it's just undue complexity to my mind. I can see failure on those things, but they're all beginning to look about the same, I think, now.
Can I ask, would you, rather than going with articulating motors, would you go with separate lift thrusts or a tail sitter, or what would you lean towards?
Well, right now, I think, I would go with separate lift thrusts, just because I've seen a few of them fly now, and they are quite simple. I don't know what the numbers are on the efficiency lost in forward flight, the true numbers, but they're relatively simple and they work. Tail sitters I intuitively love, but can't stand them because they always fall over. I just think they're cool, but being cool is not necessarily the way to run the business.
Not?
No, not necessarily. But if the render's good, then obviously it would be the winner. Actually, I suppose the real answer is whichever product has the best render must be the one that wins. I keep putting in my head what I really do is I keep coming back to thinking, why aren't we making more Cessna Caravan, Cessna 150 style, or just even high wing, fixed wing trainers, and just putting cargoes in them? What was that big one back in the day? I can't remember the name of it. Now, not Sig Cadet. There was another one. So say again.
Are you saying? Do you mean Pipistrel?
Oh well, that's the real one of that size. Yeah, no, not that one. In the model aircraft world, I can't remember the big sick kit that everyone used to use for things.
Yeah.
But some of those landing nicely on a runway are perfectly good. I'm not sure the VTOL requirement. It seems to. I get it. It's for ease of operation for people that aren't trained without a prepared area or too big a prepared area. But I do think we could do it a lot simpler.
I actually really like I don't know if you've seen it, but what Pika is doing
yes.
with their STOL, their short takeoff and landing, kind of like it's like a bush plane crop duster kind of thing. Yes. I think that's a clever approach in the meantime until battery mass and propulsion mass comes down.
Somebody's telling me, is that a New Zealand? Is the Pika thing is that a Kiwi thing, Bruce? Or is that the Kiwi Australian, isn't it?
No idea.
I think they're testing. I think they're doing operations in New Zealand. They're they're actually right around me, I believe.
Yeah,
they're California. They're R&D and headquarters, I think.
Okay, but that is a pretty platform and does seem eminently sensible. A load of big RC Cubs, Telemaster. That's the thing I was searching for, the senior Telemaster and all those sort of things. They could deliver lots of stuff. Certainly your 20 pounds of payload in a simple manner to an airfield, maybe even parachute them in if you want a bit of VTOL action. But yeah, it just takes a little bit more work for takeoff and landing. But separate lift thrust is king of the hill at the moment, isn't it? I can't, other than zipline, which is, of course, should we say a one-trick pony? Because it's a very clever one-trick pony, but it's just going one way. A focus system. Of course it is.
Something along those lines.
Of course it is. Yeah. I think it's great what they're doing, and the technology and the thought. I mean, the one thing that super impressed me. But runway equals land space, which takes away from urban. Yeah, urban. Forget urban. I'll send a lad on a moped. It'll be much better, or the urban's going to be overrun by rolling road robots, just delivering stuff all over the place in all weather. That's the important thing. There was a great thing. Did you see that simulation this week of lower airspace with trees and stuff in it? And that was very interesting. All the different turbulence and wind shears and vortexes that were down there if you were considering serious day-to-day operations in an urban environment. It was very, very interesting. Forget urban. No. But this, as you say, Andrew's saying it doesn't allow for use for traditional airports. I'll put that one up. But it's going to save traditional airports, Andrew. All these general aviation airports are going to be saved because they're going to be running delivery operations, and it's going to be the savior of general aviation. I tell you, the drones. I can't get the others to talk. Why aren't you talking, you two? Come on, join in.
You're doing such a good job on your own, Gary. We're just sitting back listening in awe.
There's a lot. Delivery drones. The problem is everyone has that thought of pizza being delivered on top of your building, isn't it? And that's the problem with it. And we've been sold the snake oil of Amazon are going to be delivering your.
Don't knock snake oil. When was the last time you heard a squeaky snake?
Amazon are going to be delivering that little packet of heatsink compound that I ordered about an hour ago. It's going to arrive on my doorstep via a drone. And the reality is, in the UK, we've trialed, you could call them drones, but they're not. They're robot delivery in Milton Keynes and places like that, which has been exceedingly successful. You drive through Milton Keynes and there's damn robots driving down the sides of the road, crossing the streets and anything. Yet we're talking about drones. So there's no question they have a place. I think we all agree that the biggest place for delivery drones is critical situations like blood transport and things like that, where stuff needs to move around quickly. I just don't buy I'm going to be getting my heatsink compound via an Amazon drone even in 10 years' time.
I think there's certainly some truth to that. I think that the idea of trying to deliver basic consumer goods, especially in urban or even suburban environments, is, I think, perhaps a bit of a stretch, just simply because of volume. The reliability you need to operate at the kind of delivery volumes that are going to be required to deliver consumer goods in a viable and cost-effective way to get your scale high enough that the costs can be low enough to make sense for delivering toilet paper or urgent burritos, as the joke goes.
Yes.
You're just not going to be able to do that until the reliability is probably 5 or 6 orders of magnitude above what even the best companies are achieving now.
But are we going to get there in that low-level wind environment with a relatively lightweight machine? Isn't it always going to get blown around the sky?
I don't know that lightweight is necessarily the worst thing. It's more a matter of wing loading, really. Well, wing loading and propulsion and ability to maneuver. At least in my experience, I've seen some very small platforms that are programmed well and have good flight control algorithms, good GNC, do remarkable things even in extremely challenging conditions. I don't know that the wind is as much of a challenge as it might seem.
Okay, well, I stand corrected there then.
What about the tall urban landscape with those big buildings blocking the GPS so you can't get a decent three-dimensional fix?
Yeah, the GPS is going to be a much bigger challenge than wind, certainly. Or even just the RF environment.
Yeah.
Do you think we might get some supplementary GPS for urban mobility vehicles? We might have things mounted on buildings so they can triangulate from known fixed sources without the hassles of a very weak GPS signal being blocked. Maybe that's the next step, and that's where the 5G will come in, eh? You never know.
I almost think visual navigation will come sooner than a real ground-based positioning infrastructure.
So no flying at night and no flying in fog.
Fog is much harder to solve than night in that situation.
Yeah, it's kind of it's kind of sort of almost here, isn't it? Skylio's are here, and there was that other lot also advertising very similar looking technology.
Sony have shown that on their video for the Pico, isn't it? They've shown that sort of like that 3D from cameras working out paths and things.
Well, Sony, that's a good. Let's leap into that now. You've mentioned it because that stay with us, please, Joseph. But that Sony thing looks quite cool, doesn't it? For a total of $15,000.
It is, but my only concern is it's a lot of money. It doesn't come with a gimbal, and it's like. I feel in some ways they're making the 3DR mistake again, which is we're releasing a drone. There's a compatible gimbal, but it's not the one you can buy. There's no price on it yet, and it's not quite available. Now, you are doomed to fail the second you are relying on a third-party company for one critical piece of equipment. And Sony are making the camera. Sony are making the drone. So I understand them not using a gimbal, but releasing a press release saying we have no pricing and no availability date on the critical part is just shoddy, and it doesn't smell very good. And they've done what everyone else does again, and this is a massive hole that the Gorilla will step back into. They have given DJI a chance.
Giving away the game, yeah.
To walk in 3 months and go, here's the Inspire 3. For half the cost, and by the way, you can get it in a week, because that's what they do best. And I'd love Sony to be successful with this. I think the app looks great. It looks. I've always said this about Sony. I love how Sony gear looks and feels. If you've ever, when you go back to the old days of Sony. And it's funny, one of the comments when I first saw the original Mavic Pro and had the remote in my hand, it felt like Sony. It was the first time DJI's fit and finish had taken a massive step forward. The way the remote was put together, it felt heavy, it felt weighty, it felt quality. And you've always had that with Sony gear. But this feels half-hearted still. You can't come out into an industry where there is someone like DJI and go, this is what's going to be available, but here's half the details. Because they can. What they may have just done is started the Inspire 3. They may have actually just set a fire under DJI and gone, what are you doing? Because they could. And the problem is, as good as Sony is, if DJI deliver, like Autel, like everyone else, deliver a product that works, that's a turnkey solution, a box, they will grab a lot of that money overnight. Never
underestimate the power of the fanboy. A lot of people are brand loyal and they will buy a Sony because they are Sony people. They're customers of Sony. Also, remember Sony with the FX3, they're targeting that on this platform. Yeah. And I think if you've got an FX3, you may say, well, I'm going to buy the matching drone. And have Sony fully released the API for the FX3? So can DJI interface with it? Or are they going to hold that in reserve and say, if you really want to use your FX3, you've got to buy our drone?
There's a lot to like with it. You know, you can't get away from the fact there is a hell of a lot to like. I think whoever's running the program has to get real very quick. And because we all know how cutthroat this industry is. And you cannot half-heartedly show a product because your competition will walk in and annihilate you. And they're doing the opposite of everyone else. Everyone else is going smaller, lighter. So Sony are walking in here, you know, look, 11 minutes flight time with the payload. That ain't cutting it. I'm sorry, but that ain't, you know, it doesn't care if it's carrying, that's with an A7 III, 11 to 13 minutes. It's not enough.
It's also interesting because I've seen so much footage on television and particularly, which has obviously been shot with a GoPro on a drone. Yeah. It's GoPro footage. You can tell there's a bit of super view going on, stuff like that. So this need to have the cinema camera hanging off the bottom of your drone is a lot less than it used to be. So one must wonder, how big is the market for this sort of thing? You know, there's only so many movie production companies in the world and so many hire companies. And a drone's probably not something you're going to hire out so much because of the huge risks compared to like a cine camera. So I'm wondering, is the market really big enough for more than one player? Or, you know, are they going to recover their development? Well, they probably don't have development costs. They probably farmed it out. And it looks like it's a lot of third party going on, apart from the core electronics perhaps. But I wonder if this is a market that is really worth even getting involved in.
Oh, sorry. Please go ahead.
Sorry. No, carry on.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, I certainly think that they're taking a big risk by effectively releasing something that falls really right between and doesn't do anything better than either an Inspire or an Alta. Pretty much everyone who has the money to spend $15,000 on a Cine platform probably already is operating an Inspire and an Alta. And so what does this really do? Not to mention the fact that we're already getting to the point, you know, as you mentioned, where smaller and smaller cameras are doing more and more. And I really don't know that these large really gimbal lifter platforms have that much of a future.
It's got some really interesting spec. You know, okay, you know, we should highlight there is no NFC or standard. Sony are introducing it, but they've said it will be optional. It's going to have a wide options with the Sony cameras, and there's a lot of people will like that, as Bruce said. It's got object sensing, which looks fairly clever. It looks very good. It's probably running PX4, and the reason I say that is that Sony are part of that whole thing with the working with them on the SDK. So whilst it might be their own flight control, I would be astonished if it's not based on PX4 somewhere, or at least PX4 Enterprise. It'll be interesting if it is, and it is using Mavlink, because we'll soon know if it is using Mavlink, how they haven't got that labeled on there, because you know PX4 would have wanted that front and stage, but Sony doesn't often push out things like that. But they've got to do better than 11 to 13 minutes flight time. A gimbal with no price and it isn't available. It's funny if they're coming. Yeah, it doesn't fill a gap. Yeah. You know, the Inspire 2 is very good at what it does. It's not perfect. It's got some major issues. You cross the forums, there are people complaining about it every day, yet they're using it every day. And they're delivering content properly with it every day. You know, this camera can't keep up with what DJI can do already with ProRes RAW and raw still image. I forgot what the term is. You've got ProRes RAW and you've basically got JPEG RAW. It's basically still images all the way through. So it still can't keep up with that. And it's only going to take them to really go, right, if we build a smaller, you imagine there was a smaller Inspire with that same camera and then a larger version with the next level up. There are a lot of people that don't want DJI. But when it comes to it, if it, the current Inspire kitted out well is about 7,000. That's still well under half the cost of this drone kitted out. You can put two of them out there.
It is an interesting entry into the market now when, as you say, everybody wants to go lighter. A few drone companies, as Dan's saying, can survive only catering to the field. That actually is very spot on. There is just a few. It's a handful. It'll be the handful. You'd have to attract the absolute star drone cinematographers into buying them for whatever reason. For a few others to pay attention. Makes you wonder where they're going. Wonder why they didn't go consumer. Wonder why they didn't go Mavic size. I wonder why they had to take themselves there. Just because. To fit their cameras.
The consumer market is completely flooded. The sales figures have started declining. They flattened off a year ago, and now the bubble. We've reached peak consumer drone. I think that's why, and this is why DJI is rolling out rehashes of old models like the new Mini SE, and they're pushing the Mini. I don't think we're going to see a lot more in the consumer market space at the moment, because everyone that wants a drone's pretty much got a drone, and if they bought something, one of the DJIs or something, they're pretty functional. They work. Why would you need to replace it?
I'm not sure.
I think perhaps we can ask GoPro why it is that Sony didn't try to enter into the consumer space.
Yeah, well, yeah, and I've always hoped Sony would buy GoPro. I always thought that would be a great home for that brand. Do you know what I mean? Where it was, I guess this is partly driven by the Japanese government. I do wonder if this is as much about a homegrown Japanese drone company. It's very possible that has an impact on this, and Sony is a natural fit. Sony, Panasonic, not so much Panasonic, but Sony makes a lot of sense. Look, camera companies are losing money hand over fist. There's still very real talk of Panasonic being in trouble, as much as they're still making lots of mirrorless. Sony not making any money at all. Nikon, all of these companies. So, at any moment in time, shareholders may make a decision and go, we're going to bin all these side industries because they're not making coin. You're selling less and less cameras that they use on these drones every day. And whilst perhaps this is a way of Sony thinking, well, it's a way for us to try and grasp a bit more of a new market to sell their cameras.
I wonder how much of that losses in the camera field is because everyone has now got a really good camera in their phone, and so the consumer, the domestic market is, or the sort of end user market is just dried up, and all I'm really making now is stuff for the vloggers and the cinematographers and things. So that massive great market where everyone bought themselves a little pocket camera is totally gone now almost.
It is, yeah. The pocket camera, yeah. Everyone had the little ones, didn't we? At one point, they're all, that's dead. So now it's mirrorless, or you're either going for something bigger. And if you look, almost every camera that's sold now is pushed towards being blogger capable. Literally, they're spinning literally every camera for a blogger. The FX9 blogging edition is going to be coming very shortly with its own cameraman. But yeah, I don't know. It's a weird entry. They need to get real if they think 13 minutes is long enough. An Alta can do more than that.
Yeah, that's a fair comment.
Is it because the only market that really China hasn't made any inroads into is the camera market in terms of professional camera level?
They've never tried, though, have they? This is the interesting thing. There's no brand. Samsung dipped their toes. Well, that's South Korean. So I'm just trying to think. There isn't. No, there isn't. They've never. Show me, yeah. Well, DJI on the professional side. DJI own Hasselblad. I'm shocked that hasn't been capitalized more.
That seems strange, doesn't it? They're not making more of that. So
unless they realise there's no money in it. If you
that's also that. It could be. Why would they invest in a dying market?
If you look at, I've just bought recently the new S5 from Panasonic, and it's a fantastic bit of kit. But if you look at how many individual parts are in a modern DSLR or mirrorless, it is thousands. They must be extremely expensive to manufacture.
No, I'm sure.
Can I just call some attention, if it's all right with you?
Yeah.
This most recent comment on, saying that Sony, if they want to make money in drones, they should be getting into optical DAA. That to me is a very interesting question.
Yeah. Well, that's being I've forgotten the name of them. Of running away with that market at the moment, aren't they? The lot that's even approved here, I think it's quite amusing. They've been put on the I'll remember the name in a minute. They've been putting on the FAA BVLOS thing, and they're already approved here out to 15 kilometers. You can do BVLOS with their detect sensor. Detect and avoid now, isn't it? I always want to say iris automation. That's it, Dan. Yeah, they're really
that's an
leading
interesting
the way.
system.
Yeah, it works. They're doing it. It's great, and they probably hate me for always. But I always like you might notice. I always put if I've got a really old photo of a company, I always put the founders an old photo in of them when they start doing really well, rather than the latest one. And then their PR people always ring me up and say, "Hey, no, stop doing that. We want the latest Easy Wizzy." I always like referring back. I always like to know where they came from. To me, that's more important than.
I certainly can remember when I was at Zipline, and there were a couple of times that I remember, we would have news and you would post a picture of quail, and it was just, yeah.
Well, you hated it or you liked it?
Because Robin was my baby at Zipline, and so whenever I saw you post a picture of quail with the news, it hurt my heart a little bit, as much as I love quail. It's like
tell us quail was the first one.
First, actually, I have to make sure I'm not releasing anything I'm not supposed to, but I believe this is all public. But yeah, that was the first commercially deployed platform. That was what Zipline scaled on initially. With the twin motor where there were pushers out on the wings, little the drop down tail hook, and it caught on the. Landed on a beanbag or a bean, like a bouncy castle. After being snagged on the tail hook. But you always would post photos of that one when we had news. There's a little running joke inside the company.
You see, it proves. You see, then make sure I know the company's watching. Then that's cool. And then, so were you in the version 2 one that I saw in that they've just retired?
Robin. Yeah, Robin was really that was the platform I flew the longest, operated and worked on the testing program for that the longest. And that was the platform that they really went from trying it out as an experiment to really doing volumes that nobody else, or at least miles flown, let's say, distance flown commercially that nobody else can really touch. That was what Robin got them to.
No, they certainly can't. And I don't know. You probably can't. You probably can't answer this, but I'm going to ask you anyway. I was super impressed with the amount of thought that had gone into how modular the thing was, and how you had the app for scanning the control surfaces and looking for defects. How you had the GPS in the battery bay, so the GPS always had within the battery, so it always had a lock and it was always ready to go. Little. There were so many little details that I was almost sort of surprised that the thing ever got to market, because you'd think there'd have to be dozens and dozens of committee meetings in order to do that. Your engineering team there must have been pretty good at getting stuff done and getting it approved.
Yeah, at least in the time I worked there. Obviously, Zipline's growing and is a much bigger company than it was when I joined. But at least in the time I worked there was very much a culture of if you can solve a problem, solve it and ask questions later. Hire the focus. The way they avoided mistakes was by being incredibly careful on hiring, in my experience, rather than, hiring a lot of people and then having to have committees and lots of internal structure to control what happens and what decisions get made because you have a lower bar for hiring. Really what Zipline did was they focused incredibly hard on hiring really strong people and then just letting them run and letting them solve problems quickly and efficiently, during the time I was there, at least.
Oh, I can imagine some established aviation, Boeings or whatever, your big established aviation companies wouldn't even have ordered the biscuits or decided on the brand of coffee in the time that some of the iterations must have been happening there, because there's some really clever stuff there. And again, you probably can't answer this, but how many test flying hours did you do before it went off into the field? Was it lots?
I'm trying to think about whether I'm allowed to answer.
No,
that.
Don't answer it. Don't answer
it. What I would say is that Zipline places more priority and spends more money on flight testing than on a lot of other aspects of the company, and certainly more than a lot of other companies spend. Flight testing, I mean, certainly this I can say, this isn't secret, is, from the very beginning up for a very large portion of Zipline's history, the flight testing and the engineering team were in the same location. And certainly both teams made sacrifices to make that happen. But, there was a very strong culture of build where you fly. And that was something I certainly appreciated there. And I think that is a big part of what allowed Zipline to progress so quickly on a lot of these innovations, as you said, that Boeing might not even have finished brewing the coffee yet.
And did you have a team of people that because it's not just the aircraft that's really the system, it's how you operate the aircraft and the systems and procedures in place for putting it on the rail, and just where the blood's stored, how the call comes in to dispatch the aircraft. It's the whole end-to-end process, because you could have the best aircraft in the world, but if that part of the logistics was all really shabby, then you'd be toast. So was there a separate team working all that? And how was learned experience from the field drawn into the total package?
So that I can certainly speak to from my personal experience. That was where I really lived, was on the operational, I guess, optimization or operational development side. Zipline has, again, during the time I was there, in my personal experience, I can only speak to my experiences. Zipline had an incredibly strong culture of continuous improvement and of transparency and feedback, and especially of respecting and listening to the recommendations and advice of whoever is closest to the customer. So in the case of Zipline, that was the operators in country. Up until not long before I left, I don't think there was a single person I worked with at the company who hadn't directly been to Rwanda or to Ghana to work with and learn from the experts we had there, flying the platform every day and learning about the platform every day. I think in general in unmanned systems, as all of you are largely operators of unmanned systems, not manufacturers. And so you would probably agree with me that for any given unmanned system, the person who's likely to know the most about that system as a whole in the big picture is the person operating it on a daily basis, not the person who designed one component for the aircraft. And so Zipline really respected that knowledge base that the operators have. And they listened to the advice and the recommendations and the learnings of the operators very, very diligently.
It's obvious. When you see it in operation, it's obvious that it's slick and well-oiled, as it were, and all that sort of a thing. The idea of the staggered recovery, I believe I was right in hearing that if 4 aircraft come back at the same time, they'll decide what the order is for landing and things like that between themselves. That's quite far ahead of the game and speaks to urban air mobility and all these other things that UTMs need to have coming along. When did you start thinking, oh, 4 might come back at once? Or was that forced on you because you've got a runway that's like 5 millimeters wide?
I would say that came as a natural progression of scaling. Really, I think the reason that Zipline did that before anyone else is that Zipline was flying, tens of aircraft at a time before anyone else. It's not so much, it's not a particularly challenging problem to solve from an engineering standpoint. Obviously, in the real world where you have, radio noise and you might have one aircraft that can't hear another aircraft and doesn't know that it's coming, and you have all these edge cases, that gets more difficult. But the fundamental problem is effectively one of saying, okay, which aircraft are waiting to recover? Which aircraft has the least battery? Recover it. And then certainly, you add, and I'm not giving anything away here because that's a vast oversimplification of the system. And I have no deep understanding of that system anyway. I'm certainly not smart enough to develop that. But really what I'm getting at is the problem itself is not that hard to solve if you have a good engineer working on it. I think the reason Zipline had it first is because Zipline pushed to get operating at scale first, and they found the problem first. That, I think, was their big advantage. In my experience, in my time there, was they started operating in the real world at serious volume and learning about those problems before anyone else really did. Because the problems you face when you are operating, 20 with a U8 RPIC ratio of say 20-1 to be within an order of magnitude or so of the real figure. When you start operating that way, the problems you need to solve are entirely unrelated to the problems you need to solve in traditional UAS. When you have a 1-to-1 U8 RPIC ratio, when you have a single pilot flying a single aircraft, it's just a completely different business, effectively. So really Zipline's advantage was not that they were that much smarter or that much better funded, certainly not better funded or that much more capable and competent than anyone else. Zipline's big advantage, in my experience, was that they found the problems faster. That's how I would.
It's all. Look, at first I thought it was utter madness. I thought it was a crazy idea. I thought it was an absolute non-starter. And then the more I've watched it, I think, I was completely wrong about that. It's very, very clever. The one-trick pony, as I say, but it's a very, 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 very clever pony. Very clever indeed. And with the whole end-to-end system is what impresses me the most. I don't think, and certainly Zipline will have thought about. It's like that latest one they put up after they retired the Robin, where they say this is their delivery place in America, and then you see the track that obviously it's taking to get into the landing wire, the arrestor wire. You can say, oh look, that's definitely but they've considered not flying over the rest of those buildings and all that sort of thing. It's all those details as the approach and all that a lot of these delivery drone bids, just you can tell they haven't thought about it at all. You can tell they haven't thought about how it's going to work when there's 5 different companies coming in, or even if it could work before they start placing their units. But that's more in an urban area, of course.
Certainly, yeah. When you get into an urban area, especially with multiple operators operating at the same time, to be honest, I don't think that even Zipline has an advantage in that situation. I don't think anyone has a good, strong approach to doing that. This that I will not comment on. I will not comment on that one. I might get myself into trouble.
But also, Rwanda, I can comment on Rwanda. Rwanda, were very welcoming. But you also had the advantage of being able to say you could serve the whole country, because it's like smaller than Wales, where Ian is, because it's a small place at the end of the day, relatively. It's a small place. But it does have terrain. It's not without its challenges, of course. But yeah, it's a relatively small place, so easy marketing things to say.
Terrain-wise, it's definitely a challenging place to operate. But I would also say less stringent regulations is part of it. I don't want to get into that. But what I do find interesting is, I think one thing a lot of people don't quite recognize, just from my experience of spending a good amount of time in Rwanda, is a significant part of the reason that it was a good place to begin operating at scale is that it is effectively a benevolent dictatorship.
Yes.
In a lot of ways. It is a country that it is quite well run, but it is effectively not a democracy. And I don't want to get into politics, but there's not a lot of bureaucracy in Rwanda, mostly because the elections are not particularly, they're not really something the politicians need to worry about, let's say.
But is that just not good business sense? There's a reason French Guiana was used for setting off a lot of the rockets. There's a reason, at the end of the day, if you're starting a business, you need to have every advantage there is in your pocket, don't you?
And don't forget, it was the actual delivery of blood was absolutely needed there. The service was actually needed. It's not like let's play around some big city around America where there's a completely established network for delivering blood on the ground anyway.
I need pizzas. I can.
Pizzas, exactly. Yes. Yes.
If I can jump in really quick on a specific point, one of my coworkers that I worked with during my time at Zipline came from the American blood banking industry. He had spent a whole career there, and interestingly, his perspective was that honestly, America's system for distribution of blood is not that much better than it is in Rwanda or in really anywhere else in the world. The distribution of blood in the United States is incredibly wasteful in the way it works, and that's why we have a lot of blood shortages not blood shortages, but why there's a lot of inefficiency in the system. And interestingly, not even only blood, but a lot of critical, let's say, critical items like that. I actually think that there's not necessarily less of a market in the US and other developed nations for that than there are in, more developing countries, because when you need something that quickly, yes, maybe you can pay a courier, but you're going to pay hundreds of dollars if you want a courier to deliver it within a few hours. And if you can have a drone do it for under $100 in 20 minutes, that's significant savings, and it's safer. It has the potential to be safer than having, someone speeding down the road in a van with an urgent package. And it certainly is more environmentally friendly for specifically urgent point A to point B direct deliveries. When it comes to more, the kind of thing that could be done through the mail, it's a completely different story. But if you need it in a few hours, a drone is a very effective way of doing it.
Yeah. Well, I'm certainly not a disbeliever in that concept, and that they will be around and about for absolute emergency stuff. There's no doubt about that. It's just quite what they'll look like yet. I don't know. I don't know. Separate lift thrust it's got to be. Oh yeah, you better put them on the right way around, otherwise you'll ruin us the stereo effect when I do.
The sound comes out backwards if it's on the wrong way. It's terrible.
Yes, it is. Let's just swing back to see the time is passing. Let's just swing back a second to that new cheap DJI thing, which is so cheap I might just buy it.
Is it actually out yet? Have I missed it? Is it officially launched?
I don't think it's officially launched, but I think another super.
Well,
No,
Best Buy have done what they always do. Best Buy have launched it on DJI's behalf, haven't they? So for the third or fourth time now, Argos started this with the Mavic 2, and then ever since then, DJI have had a real problem of keeping these things indoors. And don't get me wrong, I am fully convinced they play the Leak game, but not the Best Buy Leak game. That's just Best Buy staff doing, someone spotted something and gone, ooh, I know what I'm doing. That's a bit different. I'll take a picture of that. I think, in the past, when you've seen some of the leaks, I think the state-sponsored is probably the right term to use. But yeah, it's interesting. We've had the update for the DJI drone today, which is good. It's a week behind where I thought it
was. Tell me what does that mean? Does that mean you're no longer going to break your version 2 goggles and have to go out and buy the FPV drone?
Yeah, we now have a solution to that problem. Now, this was the one I made a bit of noise about, and okay, I'm not going to pretend it didn't get their attention, because it did. And I made a video which was open, honest, and at the end I said sorry, but as long as this issue stands, I personally can't recommend them, and that's me. I'm an idiot. No one listens to me anyway, so it doesn't.
I can agree with that.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, but it was enough, rightly or wrongly, for them to take notice of an issue which I felt had to be fixed. Now, there are many other issues, but none of them are fundamental that causes your product to randomly reset itself and stop working. That is something where you go, enough is enough on this. That's it. So we now have an update which fixes that. Now, there are some other bits that people are still complaining about, like the need to rebind when you switch between modes. The info I had on that will never change. The term that was used was, it's a complex technical issue. I have my thoughts on that issue, which is, I think they're treating the old FPV as legacy software. It's 2 operating systems, and they're just not compatible. And what's happening is, when you move from one to the other and rebind, it's just erasing the ROM chip.
We're talking about version 1, version 2 goggles.
No, this is just switching between FPV mode and the drone. And if you rebind one, it loses all the bindings of the other. And, and it is a pain. It's not end of the world, but it is a pain.
Well, it is. It's the end of the world.
It's a pain.
It significantly reduces the utility of those goggles if you're trying to use them for both, because it's such a pain in the ass to have to rebind everything.
It's a button to press.
Yeah, but you got to do it on all your drones. You got to do it on all your and back on there, and you got to do the transmitter and the goggles and the thing when you go back to the FPV drone. So it's just an unnecessary thing. There's plenty of memory there. They could save that information. They're just saying, well, we don't care, and that's not a good thing to say to your customer base.
It's a silly issue that should be resolved. My opinion on that one is, there's been no thought from the actual FPV side of thing with the version 2, and all of this smacks from that. All of these problems smack from, it was simply all about the drone, and we better make them work with that as well. And it was all last minute, but they fixed the issue, which is great for people. It means people who are bricked can now get out of that situation. And I need to go and take that video down, because I did say, in fairness, I would take it down when they did it. They have, so I need to go and change that on YouTube. They haven't asked me to be fair. They never did. I have to say, one thing I will say is, when they reached out, they were good people. There was never a question about why or what have we got to do to make this go away. It was, okay, can you tell us what you're seeing in more detail? And then it was, in a week, you're going to have an update to resolve this. So
I can't believe other people haven't already told them, though. Let's be honest. I mean, this is something they've known about for an awfully long time, because people have been bitching and grizzing, and goggles have been returned to point of sale because they're not fit for purpose. They can't have ignored this problem and just thought, oh, Ian's found it, we better find out what it is.
They can. It's outrageous.
I know a little bit about how they work, and hand on heart, I don't think they knew. Based on what I had to tell them to replicate it, to do it, literally I stepped them through exactly how to make this show. Look, I said this last year. They've changed everything they did. There were a bunch of people, and I was one of them, who used to, behind closed doors, early doors test various pieces of their hardware. I did it with the version 1. It wasn't paid. I was never paid for doing it. It was in some ways a privilege because you got to see early hardware and you got to play with some of the stuff, but there's no one doing that anymore. And this is why these issues are coming through, because, and I don't mean this because I'm not there, it's because there's no one who understands equipment looking at. I found 3 issues on the new firmware that's out today within 5 minutes. And again, it was, have you tried this? There's a certain amount of thing Bruce would do, Gary would do. You just would automatically go, I wonder what happens in this situation. And they just don't have that anymore. And they are suffering for it. And this is why we're seeing these issues.
Something interesting that actually just reminded me when you said that, you know, the find your model thing doesn't work if the goggles aren't powered up.
Yes.
I'm wondering, you can test it, but if not, I'll test it. Is the radio control transmitter actually talking to the drone, or is it only talking to the goggles, and that's where all the transmission comes out of?
It's talking to the drone. However, and this is the same as the Mavics, all of the programming polling, so this is for function buttons, is handled within the app. Now, on a normal DJI drone, that's your phone app. So, for instance, when you unplug the phone, your C buttons don't work. There's nothing for them to do. And now some of the Mavic controllers have onboard storage, but most of them don't. And this seems to be the issue here, Bruce. The second the goggles turn off, it doesn't know what the C2 button is meant to do. The remote is still communicating with the drone. It's still there, but it doesn't know what you've programmed it to. The remote is dumb, if you get my meaning, and the goggles are what are going, right, he's pressed C2, that is this function, because it's a 3-way communication between all 3, but the remote is talking to the drone, but it needs the goggles to tell it what that function should be. So when the goggles get powered off, it loses that info and it just sits there and goes, what you press the button and it just doesn't know what to do. And that was my complaint on that, because that's a very real scenario. You may have crashed because your battery in your goggles has gone flat. That could have actually been the cause for the crash, and you need to find the drone and the function isn't working. Now, I haven't tested it on public release. I can do it now because I've actually just updated it, because I sent that back as this isn't ideal. Do you know what I mean? Having to rely on it. Yeah, it's good, it's fixed. That's the important thing. We can't have people with a product that bricks itself when the battery goes flat. That is at a level beyond, as Bruce, when you're someone that recommends something, there's a point, I accept everything has faults. Nothing's perfect, but it can't brick itself when the battery goes flat. That's not good enough.
I wonder what sales of that FPV drone have been like.
I think decent. Just looking round, they're selling loads. They're
probably tailed off a lot after that first peak, though. I think it's not going to be a consistent seller. I think those people that wanted have bought it. The rest are probably looking at all the crashes on YouTube and going, "Ooh, I can't afford that."
Still see arms getting ripped off regularly.
I don't think that product's going to be around very long. That's the feeling I get.
Now, the Version 2 will be the one to go for. It's a classic Version 1 limitations. You know, it's got no special features. There's no magic modes. There's no... I always said when this was released, where's the one-touch flips? Where's the button that you hit a button and it does a roll?
I
and
can
all
get on your $20 Chinese drones.
Yeah, that's so important for cinematic footage. I mean, having to do it manually just for that, for that Netflix special. That's just that's not on.
It's still a contradiction of a drone, though, isn't it? You know, yes, they show
I don't know if there'll be a version 2. I really don't know if there'll be a version 2 because I don't think they could offer anything. It's such a middle of the road performer that version 2 they couldn't enhance it enough to make someone say, let's spend another $900 because you can bet you'll need another transmitter and another set of goggles because that's how they make their money. And people are going to say, no, I've had my taste of that and it's fine, but I'm going to get one of these freestyle drones that I can build for a fraction of the price and it's going to do everything I want, or I can get someone to build it for me or whatever. I think it's introducing people to this aspect of the hobby, and they're going to move sideways. They're not going to follow the DJI progression path. And they've had that one chance to make a good first impression, and they kind of made a good impression, but not good enough to hold on to that sector of the market. I think we're going to see the other companies picking up the pieces and running running with it. So it really asks the question, well, where does the DJI digital FPV system go from here? If they're not interested in that, except as a part of the FPV drone, if they drop the FPV drone, are we just stuck forever? Because I don't think Caddx has got the wherewithal to further develop that product. They're just an OEM manufacturer. They just buy them and put their label on them.
That, Bruce. They're not even making it. Then it's literally a name. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is going to be very difficult times ahead.
Well, it's the Sony drone it's as the Sony drone is to the Inspire or those other systems. It is the FPV drone is to the Cinelifter home-built systems or factory-built better Cine that are better. The
number one issue
better at the job.
I will say one thing I think we may not be quite acknowledging here with the FPV system, with the DJI FPV quad, is a Cinelifter and any FPV quad with that kind of agility and a decent mass flying at that kind of speed in the film industry is not an easy thing to insure. And if something is not easy to insure in the film industry, it is not easy to use commercially. I think that there may be a place in the market for both this and future iterations of DJI, FPV products in a way that there may not be for the home-built Cinelifters, purely because it's probably going to be a lot easier to get insurance to operate a DJI product around actors than it is going to be to get insurance to operate some home-built thing that you've strapped a red on top of.
It's going to be interesting, though, because you've got the problem of the production companies, certainly for television now, are quite stringent in their requirements in terms of what cameras you can use and all that sort of stuff. And so if you've got a bespoke quad like that, you can fit an approved camera, whatever it may be. But if you've got a DJI drone, if the DJI camera is not approved, then just you might as well not even bring it to the shoot.
It's an interesting product. It's the biggest problem, though, is the cost of batteries. That still remains the ultimate factor. It's the other day I've just ordered in 8 normal lipos, and that was under the cost of 2 DJI batteries, and that's the number one. It's a good product. It's not great, frankly. The image quality is crap. It flies like a whale. Not got any special
expensive
features.
battery, flies like a whale.
Bloody fanboys. Once they get started, they won't stop, these fanboys.
No.
But it does have some real nice features that we should have on every FPV drone, like proper return to home. I'm sorry, it should be there. My ear units cost 170 quid each when I'm not burning them up on the bench. And
that brings us to iNav 3.
Yeah, and it is, so there's a lot that Betaflight needs to take from this. And I think if they did, this would be completely redundant. If we had... I love the fact you can adjust the camera on the remote. It's a little feature, but it is handy to have. We can have this stuff if we just have a bit more work.
But we have iNav 3 now. And iNav 3, it's got turtle mode. Even the new Sony drone doesn't have turtle mode.
Can you imagine turtle mode on the Sony?
What's turtle mode do?
It drags itself along the ground and flips itself over.
I see.
It reverses the props on one side to flip it. If you land upside down, it just flips it up the right way.
But the video I saw was not so much a flip. It was dragging itself along the ground and then flipped over. And I was like, oh, that scratched everything up a little bit on the way. But yeah, Pavel's been...
Do that with a red strapped on top of it.
Yeah, exactly. As it's dragging itself. But yeah, Pavel's been... They've all been busy. You've got that. We've got this new software. That's what I've been doing now for OpenTX compatible radios around the corner, which is... There's a bit of hoo-ha in OpenTX world because OpenTX 2.4 keeps getting delayed, and the touchscreen support, which a lot of these radios have been shipping with touchscreens, and the new software, which is EdgeTX, is literally weeks off being launched. I've just installed it on my T16S.
Is EdgeTX not an OpenTX one then?
This is a fork of OpenTX. basically. But I don't know. I don't know a lot, and Bruce may know more on this. There seems to be a bit of discontent in a couple of the open source projects right now, and that's Betaflight, and that's where Emu Flight kicked in, and a couple of other things. And you've now got EdgeTX because the devs behind OpenTX seem to not be wanting to bring out the update that they wanted to do. So we're seeing a bit more splintering of that as well.
You get this all open source projects, though.
I almost wonder if that's simply a matter of the hobby continuing to grow. Just simply, if you look at Linux users, for example, because that community grew over time, as it grew, you started to get a larger variety of different types of opinions and different features people wanted. And I think the same thing is happening in our hobby, where it's getting big enough that there are people that want, very different features from what other people want. And so the old one or two, key open source projects can't cater to enough people anymore because they would be just full of feature bloat. So I think the forks are actually a very healthy thing for the industry.
But it's funny, isn't it? Yeah. If you look at the forks, my God, how far back do we go? Betaflight, CleanFlight, Baseflight. But would they all go back to what was the first one, Bruce? I can't remember what it's called.
Baseflight was the first.
Multi-Wii
was the and then there came CC3D and
CC3D,
Mazda 32.
What was the one after? There was another one,
Open Pilot.
Pilot. That became CC3D, didn't it?
Well, no, other way around. CC3D. CC3D became Open Pilot, became all the rest.
Yeah. So as you say, there is a natural splintering as time goes on, isn't there?
I think we should all go back to helicopter gyros and Y harnesses like the old tricopters.
That's what I started with. Brilliant. It was brilliant. Rate mode. That's all you had. But I think FreeSky also screwed up OpenTX a bit because they were paying some of the developers or something, and there was a bit of politics going on, and so they wanted to fork away. And it's like, I'm still running the original OpenTX on my Tyrannus, dated 2016 or something, or so, maybe even earlier, I don't know, and it still works fine. I've never updated it. I don't fix stuff if it's not broken, and I've had a really good success with that.
Yeah, and it is interesting, and I can't think, have FrSky got any touchscreen radios, Bruce? The Horus might be.
Don't know. I hate touchscreens anyway. Just like Steve says, touchscreens, the devil's work, because I've yet to see a touchscreen with a good anti-glare treatment. They will have a shiny surface, and you're outside in the bright sunlight with an LCD and a shiny face on it, and you might as well not have a screen at all.
But if you've got it on the product, you'd like it to be able to work as well. And that, like the T16S has it hasn't been able, but it's got a lot of other features in as well. There's a lot of stuff that they've worked on. So we're seeing that splinter down. And again, you've got Emu Flight, which again is a splinter of Betaflight, and you're seeing more and more of this.
Did you see you won that funny thing prize? And they changed because they changed the goalposts on it.
Is that what it is?
Yeah. So I don't know what happened with Peter, but Peter undoubtedly got the first one on and completed the task as requested. But there's some shenanigans gone on there, methinks.
But he gave money to all 4 people, didn't he, as well?
Oh, did he?
Yes, I believe
everyone that completed it got the full 25.
Yeah.
Oh, all right, then that's good.
But I'd be interested to know, because I was like, "Where's Pete?" Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And for those who don't know, it's I Am Pete who blew our minds with that what he did in Ardra and
it's almost like all the ones that came on afterwards would have had the ability to download his code or look at his code, fly the simulation model in real flight. I mean, I'm obviously they all coded straight from scratch with all their own ideas. Obviously they did, and then the others came along several weeks later, but not for me to say that sort of thing.
But it was a shame, Pete, because Pete's a fantastic guy, and I wasn't understanding Where he is, yeah. Someone's saying that it all goes back to Time Cop. You know, going back to the good old days. It's going back as far as.
Now I'm trying hard to remember, but yes, it does. I can't remember. There was a little bit of fuss back then, wasn't there?
Yeah, was it?
I have a box of Nays 32s, and in a couple of years I'll auction. They'll be collector's items. They'll be worth a fortune.
Well, those STM.
Not as much
on
as
them,
my
Bruce?
KK 1.4 is going to be worth.
What's on them?
Yeah,
The
I got
STM
KK
what?
2.2.
Because they're going to be. What's on them? The STM what? Because those chips are going up in
F1.
value
I
every
think it's an
second.
F1. Yeah.
You can't buy that
F1.
anymore. That's 10 grand
No.
each.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking for my CC3D now.
Yeah, I got a CC3D in a drawer. Don't worry.
Never got mine to work reliably. It just was terrible. It was the worst flight control I've ever tried to use.
Yeah, no, it was all right. I got me that flew.
Maybe it was Open Pilot, but I couldn't get it tuned, and it just wouldn't fly well.
But anyway, that is the news on the FPV. That problem's fixed. There's still a lot of other problems. A lot of people are still unhappy about the binding. Some people on about the slow SD card errors. Not everyone's affected by this stuff, unfortunately. But other than that,
I've never had any problems.
No,
I
haven't.
use a V30 card, never had a problem.
No, I've never had that one either. Yeah, I think that's about it on that side of news. Autel are on a bit of a march in the US. I think we're probably going to hear some interesting stuff from them in the near future. But yeah, other than that, it's...
Well, they're convinced they're going to be on the blue SUS gig. They're convinced. So
that's dropping by the minute. Did we talk about that last week?
Oh, no, we didn't, because it happened just after we finished.
Just after the show.
Some people got quite angry with me. Well, because what shall I say? Well, they sent that memo out. I hope somebody didn't lose their job. They sent that memo out and about look, we're sorry, walla walla walla. We're just gonna cool our heels on it a little bit. And then obviously another side, that's probably the left hand, and the right hand said, no. How on earth did that get out? So that then made me doubt the validity of that memo, which I'd had from a couple of sources. And then very quickly, I had it from 7 sources. So that was a genuine email that went out to 7 different companies. And yes, they are still, FLIR are still running that thing. It's still going to be out there. It's still a blue SUS, but they've just got a couple of things to fix on it. That's all.
Just a few things, is it? Is that all it is?
Yeah, just a couple of little things. Yeah, just a couple of little things. But yeah, they were. One chap was quite abusive, and it transpired he was nothing to do with the company. I thought, oh, crikey, he must be head of widgets or something. Yeah, I mean, he must be from Widget Co. And he's nothing to do with them at all. And then I discovered that he gets quite annoyed with people on forums and things for other reasons as well. A bit like your friendly fellow. Maybe it's the same person that you had way back in the day. And,
yes. Let's just say yes.
Yes. So it was a bit of a nut job.
Oh right. It is interesting because they are falling over by the minute, aren't they? And again, it's that interesting. There's literally 2 products you can buy.
And we're running up to the 30th, aren't we? We're running up to the Parrot announce. What date are we? We're 14 days to go to see what they're actually coming out with. That will be interesting. I think that's going to be in the. I have a hunch it's going to be in the. Louis not here. He's not here to tell us, but it's going to be in the commercial space for sure. Just a little bit better all around. So that's any other thing I think that's coming up. And when do I get my cheap DJI drone? Because I think I will get one.
Yeah, it's probably not going to be a bad buy, that one. And yeah, it's. I'll be tempted myself. I pulled out my Mavic earlier, my Mavic 2 Pro, and I'll be honest, it's too big now.
But have they overcome the Wi-Fi issues? It was Wi-Fi connectors, and people were having all sorts of issues losing links.
The real smart money could still be on the Mini 2, to be fair. And it's a bit dearer, but for what you're getting for that, it's quite the aircraft, to be fair.
Well, that's where Sony should have been playing, isn't it? Down in there somewhere if they wanted to start in this game, the sub-kilo market.
And rode on the Inspire 3, because Sony have just done that. Because that's what they've done.
for a decent inspection craft, by the way. I mean, something that people will find useful because it's got a much better Sony sensor on it. If it's lightweight, that's the only place it can beat them. Right, I think we are beginning to waffle here. Has anyone else seen anything else this week?
Just that. Did we talk about last week about that drone that drove all those birds off their colony? That's terrible.
It didn't happen. Well, it did happen, and then they came back. The birds came back, and it was one, not two, etc., etc. Quickly denied by the Parks Board or whatever it is, Parks Service they have over there, and but that's not how it played out in the media.
I can't believe that lie. It's terrible, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's just a classic of they completely ignored the facts that all of the public had been traipsing through there, people had been walking through. It just, complete and utter nonsense.
Yeah.
No extra news on the Gatwick drone situation?
No extra news on that. No. None that Ian's coming out with yet. His massive amount of freedom of information requests. No news on that yet. We'll find out, I'm sure. Look, we're definitely waffling, so it's time for me to thank Joseph. Thank Joseph very much for coming along. I'm sure we'll have you back again if you feel you can hang out with some old duffers, and your insights into the delivery drone industry is very, very interesting. Well done with your work at Zipline, and we'll look closely for your work at Volanzi as well. Ian and Bruce, I don't know what videos you've got coming out. I know Ian had a video about the FPV stuff recently, and you've had a
that was quickly pushed out. There's one on HereLink on Thursday, telling you how to get 600 watts from it.
600 watts. You did it again. It can't be 600 watts.
I've told you a million times.
I've
told you a million times. Don't exaggerate.
600 milliwatts. If the part comes for the air unit this week, you will see me breaking an air unit even more than it is already broke.
He's got a soldering bolt.
Soldering bolt. Yeah, she's an amber. She does it all in a blacksmith forge. You know, use real coal and smack stuff down with an amber.
They're made in a foundry, so you could take that to a whole new level, couldn't you? And
they're not counterfeit. They're forged.
They're forged, exactly. There you go.
I still don't know what caused that issue. I'm more frustrated at that than it actually happening, unfortunately.
But where is 600 milliwatts legal on what 2.4 or 5.8? Oh, there we are. All right, that's the answer to the question.
Legal? Who said anything about it being legal?
Yeah, well, all right.
We're telling on you. Is there a NARC thing? Is there a NARC programmer you get witness protection if you tell them that Ian's using high power?
Oh, I didn't say I'm using it. I just said this is how you do it. There's a big difference. You should always fly within the restrictions of your own area.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. You're listening.
But conspiracy to overpower, that's a crime.
Yeah, yes, they'll get me at some point.
And there will be a first part of an ADS-B series for the ADS-B alarm on RC Model Reviews. Hopefully by the end of the week, I'll just be going through the component list and telling you the basic theory of operation. And I'll be making an early download available.
Is this going to be Bruce that nothing's available? This is what you need, but you can't actually.
Yeah, you've timed it just right, so nothing's available.
You won't have to worry about the prices. Yeah.
No. All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, thank you very much, gentlemen. It's definitely time to go. Dear viewer, wherever you might be in the world, be safe. Wear a mask, wash your hands, do all those other good things that your countries require.
Are we keeping you up, Ian?
Yes. It's been a long day. I started early today.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see you next week. 21. So I'm tired. Long day for me. 2100 GMT. Cheers all. Thanks very much again. Cheers now. Bye bye.
Thanks for having me, folks.
Pleasure. Bye bye.